Well, I'm going to now introduce Raj Mohan, who will speak to us for 20 or so minutes about his concerns for our current world and his vision for We Are One Humanity website. Afterwards, he will welcome your questions. We ask that you write your questions into the chat on this webinar site. When you're called upon, please unmute your speaker and pose your question orally so we can see your face and hear your voice. I will remind you of these arrangements after Raj Mohan has spoken. The total duration of this webinar will be 1 hour, and before we depart, we will announce arrangements for future webinars. So over to you, Raj Mohan. You need to unmute.
Right. Am I being heard now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Ryan. And thanks, everyone, for joining. I really, really appreciate everybody who has taken the trouble and made the time to join. I greatly appreciate it. If Steve and Paul are present, I know that they had registered. Steve Caldwell and Paul Caldwell, two of the great musicians of our time, along with their brother Ralph Caldwell, who have enabled millions around the world to understand that we are one humanity over the decades. I don't want to embarrass them, nor do I want to embarrass other wonderful people who have joined, but I felt I would take the liberty of naming Steve and Paul before saying much. Now, this is a surprising and even exciting moment for me. I didn't quite expect to be involved with a new little enterprise at the age of 89. Of course, I'm grateful to the wonderful associates who agreed to join with me in forming this organization, and the faces of the board members you have already seen, who have given time, given money, given ideas, given encouragement. So I do want to thank all these colleagues of mine on the board of We Are One Humanity. You already heard from two of them, Edward and Margaret. I also want to thank in particular, and I believe he is present. I don't want to embarrass him much more, but other than naming him, but Dr. Barendra Desai, who's a wonderful doctor of Indian origin, long settled, long living in the United States. Oh, yes, we can see him, Dr. Barendra Desai. How wonderful that you have joined. I wanted to thank you for the handsome donation you made, which has been very significant in our ability to start. So I wanted to thank this amazing doctor who has been such a support. Thank you so much, Dr. Barendra Desai. I'm glad you've allowed yourself to be seen. And Edward, you've enabled us to see him. Thank you so much. And I also want to mention that before we end today, in fact, the last thing that we will have as we end is this wonderful, wonderful music that Penelope Thwaites, a dear friend who is of Australian origin, who lives in the UK, a very great musician. She has prepared a magnificent piece of music, which already is available, has been there for some time. And she has very kindly allowed our website to keep that music and to play that music. And all those who are attending the webinar today will be able to hear that piece of music at the very end of this webinar. So thank you, Penelope, very, very much indeed. Now, I don't have to spell out the context of the times in which We Are One Humanity is appearing as a website. We all know about the attacks on democracy all over the world. We know about the conflagrations in the Middle East, Europe, Sudan, Yemen, Myanmar, so many places all over the world. As human beings, as citizens, as residents, we felt we had to make a response. Being who we are, being where we are. It's natural that India and the US will feature on the site of We Are One Humanity, or as sometimes we call it WAOH, W-A-O-H. It's inevitable that India and the US will feature a good deal on our site, but we want, of course, as far as possible, to be aware of the whole world and to bring that world from time to time to our site to the extent of our ability to do so. What is our wish? We don't have the wish to influence elections. I want to make a response, no matter how tiny, no matter how minuscule, to the worldwide thrusts against democracy and equality, which are hurtful thrusts. And these are thrusts also for the supremacy of some groups and for the downgrading of other groups. I would like to see more trust, more equality, more friendship, more fairness, more mutual respect in the world than I find. There is a great Indian thought, a very old Indian thought, of which many of you are aware, which says, don't worry about the fruits of your action, don't worry about results too much, do your duty, leave the results in the Almighty's hands, in the hands of the future. Now, I think that human rights and essential freedoms should not be denied to anyone or any community anywhere in the world. Human rights should not be denied to anyone, any community, any nation in the world. And if they are denied, or when they are denied, you and I should have the ability to express our unhappiness. That is a very strong impulse behind We Are One Humanity and this website. I would like to support struggles for liberty, equality, dignity. I would like to support these struggles wholeheartedly, yet without ill will or hatred, and I hope with necessary wisdom and discretion. Now, in the middle of the last century, after World War II ended, virtually every nation signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which contained these opening articles with which most of you, or much of which most of you, are familiar. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They're endowed with reason and conscience, should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Sisterhood was not mentioned. That's 1948, Article 1 of the Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. When this was embraced in 1980s, these ideas, by nations in Eastern Europe, which had long been under authoritarian rule. And when in 1990, apartheid ended in South Africa, these norms of democracy, equality, and goodwill received an amazing boost in the world. In our 21st century, however, we have seen a return of the goal of supremacy for some section or sections of humanity and the inferiority of other sections. A return also to the appeal of strongman rule. Rights and freedoms have been restricted in several nations. Moreover, violence and war have been unleashed. The need to realize that all of us are one humanity is more pressing than ever. The conflicts of our world in the Middle East, in Europe, in other parts of the world, in Myanmar, for instance, across Africa, these conflicts will not end without the involvement of other nations, without, in fact, the involvement of the peoples of our world. Now, one point I wanted to express, which I hope others will allow me to make, people from other parts of the world, which is that the Indian diaspora is the world's largest diaspora. and is growing at an unbelievable pace. And this diaspora is visible in every country in the world. Now, just 2 or 3 days ago, the US announced that it will issue 250,000 visa slots for Indian travelers, encompassing tourists, skilled workers, and students. In 2023, the US issued over 140,000 student visas to Indians, the biggest for any country. And this year, 2024, over 1.2 million Indians are expected to travel to the US, 1.2 million. Now, Indians are traveling to other parts of the world. They're making the world their home. They're settling in all parts of the world. Now, it is a fact that many people of Chinese origin have difficulty in entering many parts of the world. It's true that many Africans have difficulty in entering many parts of the world. If you're a Muslim, you have difficulty in entering many parts of the world. But Indians, except for Muslim Indians, seem to be able, apart from the great challenges of travel and money, and visas, of course, but by and large, people of Indian origin have an amazing chance to be in all parts of the world. So, what is our, if this is the reality of the Indians have a chance now to be in all parts of the world, what is our responsibility as Indians to humanity? This is a question that I want to ask. I want all the Indians to ask. Now, some of you know that just recently, William Dalrymple, this very well-known, successful writer, has published a new book called The Golden Road about ancient India and ancient India's worldwide influence in the first 1,000 years of the Common Era. So in today's global crisis, of which we have seen evidence in the last several hours, what is the role of India? What is the role of Indians? Of course, all of us should ask this question, but Indians have a very great responsibility to ask this question. And I want to say this, that apart from, I'm thinking very much of our neighbors, India's neighbors, the Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Nepalis, Sri Lankans, Myanmaris, Afghanistan, all the nations in South Asia. And South Asians are found, as Indians are found, US, Europe, Australia. And one very important task I feel all of us have, who are interested in bringing some peace and democracy, equality to the world, that people of South Asian origin, who not so long ago had good relations with one another, these relations have more or less ended. Now, those of us of South Asia who live in Europe or in Australia or in Canada or in the US or in other parts of the world, Japan, elsewhere, especially those who are first or second generation South Asians in other parts of the world, who don't have great challenges of problems for their relatives back home if they're friendly with their neighbors. Then friendliness is not looked upon with favor in our part of the world, in India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or elsewhere, Sri Lanka. Friendliness may not be looked upon with favor in those parts of the world, but second generation people living in other parts of the world from those countries, they can meet and get to know one another and create circles of friendship, solidarity, of reconciliation, of partnership that will impact life back home in South Asia. This is true for other parts of the world too. But being South Asian myself, being Indian myself, I want to emphasize this point. Then I want to mention one or two other points before I end, before I hope there will be questions. The change in India, starting in June of this year, has been very significant. We all know of the anti-democratic thrusts in India, but we also know that in June this year, although Prime Minister Modi has become Prime Minister for the third time, He has become prime minister with a much smaller majority and with a very vigorous opposition. And many democratic victories were scored that were unexpected. And from June of this year, there has been at least a modest, but I think significant shift in India, which we can take heart from. So what do I ask all of you who have so kindly joined this webinar? First of all, please give this little minor, modest attempt your good wishes. Please find more viewers for us. Please find young viewers for us. Help us with funds if you can. That's very important. And join the discussions that will take place on the website or in the webinars. So I think I will stop with that. I thank you again, and I hope, Margaret, that we can now have some questions from those who have joined.
Thank you, Raj Mohan. So friends, you need to write your questions in the chat. But since at the moment I'm not seeing a question in the chat, I'm going to ask my own question, which is the following. So Raj Mohan, in the last 30 years, or we could maybe even say 40 years, but certainly in the last 30 years, we have seen a growing international civil society collective that we could call the peace-building community. Quite a few of the people who are registered on this webinar today would consider themselves part of that community. And in spite of a number of achievements that we've seen in the last 30 years, I think many of those people, and I might even put myself in this category, are feeling discouraged with the world right now. And I wonder what you yourself would say to such people and how you could imagine the website helping give new energy to this group.
Thank you, Margaret, for a question that I'm sure is on the minds of so many people. And I think one very simple answer is that when we see each other, when we see one another, other peace builders, other people who want more friendship and more equality, more fairness in the world, the more we see one another, we are encouraged. But then also there are sometimes very concrete signs. I mean, I mentioned the recent modest change in India. It's far from sufficient, but it certainly gives us heart. And there are similar changes sometimes in other parts of the world. But ultimately, there has to be this very deep conviction that justice and truth and fairness will win out in the end. If that had not been the case, our world, which is very close to danger, which is very close to, in some ways, close to almost terminating the planet's life, but it has survived for thousands of years. There have been horrible things in the world in thousands of years, and yet the world has survived and moved forward and moved forward and moved forward, and various forces of tyranny, of great cruelty, have succeeded for a time, but they've had to leave. So the history of the world is one very important reason, a factor that enables us to believe that these very painful times we're currently going through will also end.
Thank you, Raj Mohan. I'd now like to invite Srikanth Narasimhan, who is the first person to have put a question up in the chat. Srikanth, could you unmute yourself and ask your question to the group? Are you there? Otherwise, I will ask this question on his behalf. How do you see Gandhi's nonviolence as relevant in the current world?
Well, I think I would say that the horrible results of violence that we are seeing every day, don't those tell us that nonviolence is definitely superior? I'm not saying that nonviolent direct action, satyagraha, as the Indian phrase goes, satyagraha, clinging to the truth, that will by itself stop the violent wars. But if the peoples of the world unitedly ask for fairness, for justice, without hatred, with determination, and demand that there should be justice in the world, that kind of nonviolent action is bound to speak to the world, even in this time of great peril. So yes, I am absolutely convinced that firm, united, nonviolent action will work in the world. And here I will mention something I was going to mention in my earlier remarks, but I did not mention. There is a most remarkable man, or there was a most remarkable man who died in June this year, a man called Reverend James Morris Lawson Jr., who died in June this year at the age of 95. He was an amazing African-American figure, a very close colleague and comrade of Martin Luther King Jr. Born in Ohio, in the eastern part of the US, did amazing work in the south of the US and then in California. And I had the privilege of knowing this man. And I have the privilege now of working on a biography of this man. I don't know whether I will succeed in completing it. I've done half of it. But this amazing man, James Lawson Jr., this amazing African-American scholar and an activist, absolutely passionately devoted to a nonviolent fight for justice in the world. So people like him, and there are many others like that, who also add to the hope that nonviolence direct action can work.
Thank you. Dr. Christian Bartow, are you there? Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, of course. I'm so delighted to listen to you, Raj Mohan, and it's a great joy to have this We Are One Humanity World Citizen approach manifested. And how can I participate by contributing to your precious new website by chance?
Well, thank you so much. Yes, you can send your ideas. If you're in a position to contribute financially, that too would be appreciated. But your encouragement is greatly welcome, and thank you. And what a magnificent background you're showing. Fantastic.
Yes, I changed my background a bit, not for entertaining, but just to refer to the fact that I've written an article on Gandhi, Tagore, the Mahatma, and the World Federation perspective of Gandhi, and recently, and maybe it might also be interesting for the readers of your website, because this is a matter of research also, to find out what Gandhi, your grandfather, contributed to this concept of a world federation without national armies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rajdeep Mahanta, are you here? Can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, I'm here. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sir,
thank you very much. It was such a pleasure listening to you. So my question is rather, I'm from Assam. I'm presently pursuing my undergraduate studies in history. Listening to you, I I have been interested in Gandhi, but what appals me often is the sort of hate that's rampant among the Indian youths in particular regarding Gandhi. So how can we tackle that, and what is the reason you believe behind this hate for Gandhi?
Thank you for your question, and I really appreciate it, and I'm very glad to learn of what you're doing. There's been so much deliberate disinformation, spread of false stories, false histories. When everybody who has done the research knows that nobody opposed the partition of India with as much passion as Gandhi did. Yet the disinformation is that Gandhi helped the partition of India. So there are reasons like that, disinformation. Gandhi wanted Hindus and Muslims and Christians and atheists and Sikhs and Jews and Parsis and Jains and everybody in India, subcontinent, before it was partitioned, to live together. Gandhi wanted free India. He accepted with great sadness partition when it happened before he was killed. But he wanted in the India that remained to be an India for everybody. And he said that again and again. And that was the one reason why he was in fact killed. Some people who were very unhappy that India should be an India for all. So those who do not want an India for all naturally regard Gandhi's ideas as unhelpful to them, as dangerous to them, dangerous to their ideology. So that is one reason why disinformation and hatred for Gandhi has been spread. But you will also find, as I have found, because I don't see as many young Indians every day as you see in Assam, but I want you to know that Gandhi, who also spent some time in Assam, not as much as he could have and should have, but there are some amazing people in Assam who have studied Gandhi and have understood him, and who even today are working for partnership, equality, mutual respect, for Assam to be an Assam for everybody, where everybody of every ethnic background should have rights. So I'm very pleased at your question, and you will yourself find more answers, not only to explain why this is happening, but also to overcome it. And just as positive changes have taken place, at least in some parts of India, in the last several months, those changes will before long also come to Assam, especially with people like you there. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Andrew Stallybrass. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you so much for this opportunity to meet like this and talk across the miles. So much of your life, Rajmohan, has been dedicated to trying to heal the divisions between the wounds of history between India and Pakistan. Now we have two nuclear-armed powers facing each other across the line of partition. How do you not despair?
Because, dear Andrew, there are many people also like you in the world. And the young person who asked a question before you spoke, and his keenness to do something. And there are so many like that. So I worry. I worry very, very deeply. I'm anxious. Currently, you mentioned the two nuclear powers next to each other, India and Pakistan. But what's happening in the Middle East now? I mean, the imminence of something very terrible is frightening, worrying. But I want my worry and my anxieties certainly not to turn into despair. And I feel that I should do my bit. And when I get the chance like this, when so many people are interested or supportive of what I do, obviously my enthusiasm grows.
Thank you. Mildred Lopez. Are you able to unmute yourself and ask your question? There. Just unmute yourself so we can hear you. We see your picture, but we're not hearing your voice.
We're also seeing him in a very still way.
Yes, it looks like the picture
Sure.
rather than the live person. Well, I'm going to ask this question on the behalf of Mildred. Burma or Myanmar?
Can you hear me now?
Ah, good. Now we can. Yes, go ahead and ask your question, Mildred.
Sorry, I was intent on listening. I'm from Malaysia, and I work with a lot of refugees which are flooding Malaysia. None of them want to leave Myanmar. They want to be in Myanmar, but the military has been fighting against its own people in the longest war ever. So they're not fighting an external party, they're fighting its own people inside. So I'm here actually to get some ideas as to what to do and draw some hope for me. Thank you.
May I suggest that you, if possible, continue to look at the website of We Are One Humanity, where you might get some ideas. Where are you now? Are you in Myanmar or are you outside?
I'm in Malaysia.
Malaysia.
Yeah.
I'm sure in Malaysia too, there would be some people from Myanmar who are like you as refugees, perhaps, or who've been there for longer.
Thousands of them.
Yeah.
For over 30 years.
And of course, those who have relatives back in Myanmar may have difficulty in necessarily starting any activity directly for democracy or for unity or friendship. But starting some dialogues, conversations, listening to people is the first step. And you don't have to immediately have a very large group, but a very small group of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 who share your anxiety, who want to do something. And I'm myself aware of several people connected to Myanmar in other parts of the world who are trying, as you must be aware. So you already have some circles, and you can also be in email contact with us. But I would say that you continue your interest in the website, and through contacts there, you may get some further ideas. But I am very grateful for your concern and your eagerness to do something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Raj Mohan, it occurs to me just listening to Mildred's question that one service that this website might be able to do in the future, but we need to give some more thought to it, is how we link people up who have the same areas of concern. So here is Mildred working with refugees in Malaysia who are coming from Myanmar, but the whole question of how to respond to the huge migration issues that many countries have, what kind of hope do we give those people? That's a subject in itself, and perhaps we should have a subgroup that's working on that. So let's keep in touch, Mildred. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much.
Several of the comments that we're getting here are not questions per se, but tremendous expression of gratitude and encouragement for the website. And we are getting those kinds of messages from Egypt, from Stroudsburg University, from Ukraine. I want to go next to Margaret McAloon, Peggy McAloon, who is online here. Peggy, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? You need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay. Yes, my question was the number of, when you spoke of the increasing number of Indians who are given visas or just migrating anywhere or being granted, does that, and the fact that it's increasing, does that number make a differentiation between Muslim Indians, or is the word Indian, how is it applied? Excuse my lack of knowledge about that, but I think I'm probably not the only one who doesn't know that.
Well, when one says Indians, of course, it means Indians of all kinds, Christian Indians, Muslim Indians, Hindu Indians, Jain Indians, Sikh Indians, and so forth. And it is true that Indians of all kinds have migrated all over the world. However, it is also a fact that that Indians who happen to be Muslims have greater difficulty in obtaining visas or ability to become residents or citizens of some other parts of the world. Still, many of them also have overcome these obstacles, but the obstacles that they run into are greater than the obstacles that non-Muslim Indians run into.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. We'll go on to Asha Bukh. Asha, can you unmute and ask your question?
You hit a point.
Thank you.
Asha, there we are.
It's a great privilege to hear from you. My question was, I was born in India, live in UK for 45 years. We claim to be the citizens of democratic country. How can we convince the British government not to support Israel, not to provide them arms, and not to say that it is your right to defend by killing the people in Gaza or Lebanon? Similarly, how can we ask the Indian government not to purchase oil and armaments from Russia, because that money goes to kill the civilians in Ukraine? So as a citizen, we feel quite helpless, but also as a global citizen, we feel compassion for the people who are killed. How can we do that? What can we do?
Well, you can speak the way you have spoken just now.
To
You-
whom?
Well, at least to one another, you know. And so I wish I could arrange an interview between you and the Prime Minister of the UK, but I don't have that capacity. I also don't have the ability to enable you to meet all the leaders in India. But the fact that you are searching for this, that you want what you feel is justice and fairness to be implemented, that is a very great foundation for the next step. I respect that very much, Ashaji, and I'm very happy to hear you. So I hope that more people like you will respect what their consciences are telling them and will come together. But you are right to point out that in many parts of the world, there is an insufficient demand for fairness everywhere and for justice everywhere, very insufficient, and a condoning and a permission of wrong things that go on. So the mobilization of people all over the world remains a very great necessity. Thank you.
I think we should try to get together, like-minded people. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to Ranjit Katua. Are you there? Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Ranjit. I'm going to ask this question as you have put it in the chat. What is your vision regarding spreading of Gandhian thoughts in India? Do a survey about why young people in India are having the wrong concept. It's mostly due to social media, not going through the authorized books. In my opinion, it can be prevented by arranging seminars in colleges. So this is a bit similar to the previous question, but I think it has more to do with actually what action could be taken to give different thinking about Gandhi.
I think this gentleman that you have been reading comments from is proposing the very solution that he's asking for. And I appreciate that more conversations, discussions, seminars should take place in colleges, and small teams can initiate those. So I really appreciate this person's keenness here. And I hope that he or she, I didn't quite catch their name. I hope that this person will remain in touch with us.
Thank you. That was Ranjit Katua's question. We'll now go on to Mexico, to Rodrigo Martinez Romero. Are you there, and can you unmute yourself to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Margaret, and greetings to everybody from Mexico City. Raj Mohan was here with Usha, her wife, in the voyage of discovery 14 years ago, and that was my initiation to Initiative of Change. So grateful, Raj Mohan, for your relentless leadership. And my question is, what role do you see the ancestral wisdom of our indigenous people play in building the political, educational, and societal innovations that are necessary to truly create this awareness that we are indeed one humanity?
What a wonderful statement you have read out, friend, and how greatly the world needs the wisdom of the indigenous people today. And it is a sad fact that this wisdom is not sufficiently available to the rest of humanity. And vaguely, many of us know that there's a lot of wisdom concealed in the thoughts, the art, and the message of the indigenous people of the world. But we certainly need greater energy in distilling these thoughts and communicating them, whether it's through videos or other ways, films, inspired films. But this is where, let me say that a man like me is quite useless. What you need to convey great truths, whether they are ancient truths from the indigenous people or some fresh modern inspiration that may come to anybody, what is greatly needed to convey truth to large numbers of people is some inspired art, some inspired painting or sculpture or photograph or film or play or novel, and which can do far more than an article. But that is what we need. But thank you so much. So if we can combine inspired art with this wonderful message of the indigenous people, that's what perhaps we all need.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Shankar Sankalapuram. wants to focus on Raj Mohan's maternal grandfather. Why don't you ask your question?
Good evening. I'm a retired Air Force officer. I'm from Delhi. I just have a little question for you. What is the single most quality you like of your maternal grandfather?
Well,
Maybe you need to tell those who don't know who your maternal grandfather was, Raj Mohan.
maybe this good man who's asking the question can tell us all.
Mahatma Gandhi ji.
Oh, so you want to focus on Gandhiji?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So, well, Gandhi was actually my paternal, my father's father. So what do I most admire in him? Of course, his willingness to go to the fullest, maximum, complete extent in pursuit of his truth. So if his conscience, his mind, the inner voice told him to follow a particular thing, he absolutely never wavered. No fear, no hesitation, no consideration of the cost to him. If something was true, he felt he had to do it, he would not allow anything to come in the way. So an absolutely relentless pursuit of the deepest truth that he believed.
Thank you.
But I'm very glad that you think he was my mother's father, but he was my father's father.
Okay, I got this from Wikipedia. Sorry. Okay.
Even Wikipedia has to be looked at with care.
Yeah, true. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
we're getting close to the end of our allotted hour here. Ramsey in Brussels, are you there? Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I am, and thank you very much for allowing me to participate in the meeting today. I'm truly honored and grateful. Raj Mohanji, I would suggest that there's a bureaucratic disconnect, an invisible barrier between the civil society, those who are pressing for nonviolent direct action, and the political decision makers. One channel of communication, of getting them voice in to the forums of decision makers, is the channel made available through the United Nations Economic and Social Council, the system of NGOs established with consultative status. There is, for example, right now, a massive coalition, 90 countries, formed with the leadership of Saudi Arabia and Norway to press for the recognition of the Palestinian state. And yet, the only way for NGOs to really support that initiative within the forums of the UN is through the consultative status NGO system. Bearing that in mind, therefore, do you think perhaps that should be considered, i.e. setting up an NGO consultative status as another additional way of nonviolent direct action? Is that a channel you would propose or advocate considering to make use of? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your very important question. So I don't quite know how to make the human rights cause more effective within the United Nations, and how to make the United Nations more effective within the world. Both are very great goals before us. But I think that, to me, the broad question which is underlined by your very significant question is this: the peoples of the world have very strong views, for instance, in support of Palestinian statehood and a recognition of the Palestinian statehood. How can the people, the wishes of the people, and this seems to be quite clear from various events in the world. We know what the people of Africa, the people of Asia, the people of the Middle East, of Europe, Americas, Latin America are thinking about this. So how the opinions of the people of the world can be made to count in the United Nations and in the affairs of the world. That is the great question. You have a specific suggestion on that. I don't know quite whether that is the way to do it, but I want to underline the real message behind your question, which is how to translate the wishes of humanity in the affairs of the world. I appreciate that.
If you allow me to just form very briefly, I'm not saying it is the way to do it. I'm just saying it is one of many possible ways, and maybe it'd be good not to deprive ourselves of that additional benefit.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I'm going to take one last question from Sarajevo, from Vyacheslav Saye, with whom my husband and I spent time last week. Vjeko, you want to come online?
Yes, I think I'm online now.
Yes, we can hear you.
We are actually almost at the end. My question was actually something that maybe we should think more for the next webinar, and it is why we go backwards in building relationships among ethnicities and religious communities in the time of gaining freedom and developing democracy. I think often about that, especially in the setting of my country of Bosnia, which was part of ex-Yugoslavia before, in which people had better relationships than they have now. And every year as is passing, the relationships are worsening. So I don't know when it will stop and how we can go ahead.
Well, thank you for a great question. And I think it shows that unity, friendship, equality, mutual respect are not the natural states of the world, of human beings. They have to be worked for, and they have to be repeatedly worked for. Many nations find reasonable advance towards those goals. But then there are setbacks, and you have to fight again and again. So equality, unity, goodwill, mutual respect are not achieved once and for a long time. They have to be fought again and again and again. And I thank you for underlining this very, very painful and important truth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all who've participated and for the many messages that have come through on the chat that we haven't been able to fully capture. I hope, Edward, we have an archive of that. We are delighted that we've had over 300 people joining in this webinar. We not only welcome, but indeed need ideas from all of you. Every article on the site has a comment section at the end. General ideas can be sent through the content page. We need to have new topics that people would like us to address in the webinar. Thank you, Vjeko, for this suggestion that you just gave. We urge all who want to participate with us to join in reflecting on the spirit we need within ourselves to approach the world right now, and to offer your suggestions in that spirit. Please be sure you've signed up for our mailing list, which is the way you will be informed of future events and new additions to the site. We Are One Humanity will hold a webinar on the first Wednesday of every month, the next one being on November the 6th. We will inform you of the topic once that is clinched through the mailing list. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As we leave, we are going to play the music of Penelope Thwaites, who's here with us today. Her music is actually on the website. It is based on a Tamil song. Every human is my kinsman near, every country is my country dear. Over to you.